The House passed two bills last week that would tighten gun sales regulations and expand background checks. This is a new push by Democrats to enact the first major gun control law in more than 2 decades. Here to discuss, a guy who could walk us through this backwards and forwards and all over again, Cam Edwards, editor of bearingarms.com. Cam, man, great to have you.
Hey, Buck, thanks so much for the invite, man.
So let's start with this. People probably haven't even heard. I mean, I've been trying to get the word out about H.R. 1, which is basically the replay 2020 and then some so that Democrats win every election forever because there's no Voter Integrity Act. That's not what Democrats call it, but that's what it would be. H.R. 8, H.R. 1446 that deal with gun issues, Second Amendment issues, Cam. Tell us what's going on here. I bet most of the people watching haven't even heard about it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I've been surprised at the lack of media coverage for these bills, given that they're the first part of Joe Biden's anti-gun agenda to get through at least, one chamber of Congress. So H.R. 8 is a quote unquote universal background check bill. And what this would do would require that every private transfer of a firearm, with limited exceptions, be conducted through a federally licensed firearms dealer. So you'd have to find a gun store that would do these background checks. You'd have to drive there. If you're selling a gun to somebody, even if it's somebody you'd have to do this. In fact, not only when you're selling a gun, if you're loaning a gun to somebody, so your buddy wants to take your rifle on his hunting trip out west, well, you got to go down to a gun store. Your neighbor calls you and says, I'm worried that my abusive ex-boyfriend is going to show up at my door. You'd have to find a gun store that's open that late at night in order for you to loan her a gun for self-defense. And Buck, if you violate this law, it is punishable by up to a year in federal prison and a $100,000 fine.
Is there anybody who thinks that this is really substantially, is there any data, I shouldn't say anybody who thinks because the left is crazy, is there any data to substantiate that this would cut down on violence of any kind? This kind of additional background check?
No, and I mean, that's the problem. I mean, first of all, I think the bill is deeply flawed in a couple of ways. I think that it entraps otherwise would-be legal gun owners, and it turns them into criminals. But at the same time, I have to admit, this bill is largely unenforceable. And it's absolutely unenforceable in terms of preventing criminals from getting a gun on the black market, because there's no way that the government can try to monitor every private transfer of a firearm. If they did so, we'd be living in a police state that, makes China look like a libertarian paradise. So this bill has enforceability issues, but I also think it has some real ideological issues, because it is aimed squarely at legal gun owners and creating a crime out of thin air rather than actually focusing on the violent criminals, a much smaller subsection of the American population that's responsible for the rise in shootings and murders that we're seeing in so many cities right now.
So I mean, this crime, to really deter violence in the way that they would seem to think, or that they would propose, it would be if I'm willing to sell if I'm going to sell somebody a gun, I would then have to go and get a background check done on that person. But if I wanted to sell somebody a gun who was a felon and I didn't care, I'm not going to do the background check anyway, right? So I don't really understand. I mean, the way this works in different states is guys illegally go, they buy guns in a state where they can, or they get them maybe illegally themselves. They sell them out of their trunk to whomever they get into contact with who wants a gun. They're not running background checks. So they're not going to run background checks on this either. So what's the point?
Well, the point is for Democrats to be able to say they did something rather than actually something that works. And unfortunately, this is an issue that polls well, because most people don't know the devil in the details. Now, in 2016, voters in Maine actually had the chance to approve or reject universal background checks, and they said no. They voted it down 52-48 because they understood the problems in this bill. That same year, a background check bill narrowly passed in Nevada, like 50.1% of the vote. It did pass, but it was unable to go into effect because of the flaws in how the law was written. So, the Democrats think that they can get political benefit out of this. But the thing that bothers me the most, honestly, Buck, beyond the attack on my Second Amendment rights, which at this point I'm almost numb to, it's the fact that violent crime is going up in a lot of cities in this country. And there are good people in bad neighborhoods who really do need help. And instead of delivering on proven effective targeted deterrence programs that actually focus on those violent offenders, these Democrats are offering a false promise to these people. They're lying to these people about what this bill will do, saying it will make them safer when it won't do a thing to help them or their children or their grandparents. This is a do something bill. We need to do something that works.
Hey Team Buck, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked the video, click that little thumbs up button. And if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.